The suburbs are a war of attrition. You don't fight with bullets and bombs, you fight with passive-aggressive notes about recycling bins and the precise, soul-crushing uniformity of lawn height. I'd survived 20 years in the Army, from the dust-choked heat of Iraq to the frozen forests of Eastern Europe, commanding logistics that kept entire battalions moving. I could get a tank engine replaced in a blizzard or 1,000 hot meals to the front line under fire. I thought I had seen the peak of human stubbornness and bureaucratic insanity. Then I moved to Harmony Creek Estates. And I met Brenda Larchwood. I was on my new porch, a magnificent slab of treated pine that I'd personally defended from the HOA's approved stain color swatch, sipping a lukewarm coffee. The morning air was thick with the scent of fertilizer and the sound of my life savings being turned into noise. Inside, Gus, Manny, and Sal, a trio of contractors who communicated primarily through grunts and the percussive symphony of demolition, were tearing the heart out of my 1990 S-era kitchen. It was the price of admission for a house that didn't have avocado-colored appliances. "Hey, boss!" Gus yelled, his dusty face appearing in the gaping hole that used to be my kitchen window. "You want we should save this floral wallpaper? Could make a nice curtain for my truck." "Just burn it, Gus," I sighed. "Give it a Viking funeral. It's what it would have wanted." "You got it." He disappeared back into the dust cloud. This was my retirement, the quiet life, trading reveille for the gentle chirping of birds and the stress of command for the stress of choosing between eggshell white and antique linen paint colors. I was Master Sergeant Jack Miller, retired, and my biggest operational challenge for the day was supposed to be assembling a flat-pack Swedish bookcase. That's when I saw it. The Mobile Munchies truck. It was a converted school bus, painted a cheerful, almost offensively bright shade of yellow, with a cartoon hot dog wearing a chef's hat on the side. It was part of a county-wide summer program to make sure kids who relied on school lunches didn't go hungry when school was out. It was, by any rational measure, a good thing. But Brenda Larchwood was not a rational measure. She was a unit of measurement all her own, calibrated in increments of pure, unadulterated spite. As the Mobile Munchies truck signaled to turn into the small community park at the end of our cul-de-sac, a beige sedan cut it off with the surgical precision of a pit maneuver. The car, a late-model sedan so devoid of personality it looked like it was rendered in a low-budget video game, belonged to Brenda. She emerged from the driver's side, a woman in her 50s dressed head to toe in various shades of taupe, brandishing a thick 3-ring binder like a riot shield. The binder of bylaws, the suburban Necronomicon. My day was about to get significantly less quiet. I leaned forward in my rocking chair. The show was starting. Minute 0 o'clock, the standoff. The lunch truck's brakes hissed as it came to a halt. The driver, a young guy named Leo with a wispy mustache and a perpetually confused expression, leaned out of the service window. Ma'am? You're kind of blocking the entrance." Brenda planted her feet, her orthopedic sandals gripping the asphalt with grim determination. "According to Harmony Creek Estates, Bylaw 74C, subsection B," she announced, her voice carrying across the unnaturally green lawns. "Commercial vehicles exceeding 1.5 tons are prohibited from parking on community asphalt between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. for non-maintenance purposes. This is a clear and flagrant violation." I took a slow sip of my coffee. She didn't just know the bylaw number, she cited it with the cold, dead certainty of a prosecutor. I had seen interrogators with less confidence. Gus and Manny had reappeared at the window frame, their hammers momentarily forgotten. They were watching, rapt. I couldn't help myself. I stood up, walked to the edge of my perfectly manicured per bylaw 14A lawn, and cupped my hands around my mouth. Brenda, it's a lunch truck, not a parked 18-wheeler. It's here for 30 minutes to feed children. You know, small humans who require sustenance to continue existing? She didn't even grant me a glance. Her focus was entirely on the cartoon hot dog, as if it had personally offended her ancestors. Rules are the bedrock of a harmonious community, Mr. Miller, she said, her voice tight with righteousness. Your lack of respect for them since your arrival has been noted in the weekly minutes. I was in the minutes. I felt a strange sense of pride. Hey, lady, Gus shouted from the window, bits of drywall dust puffing off his shirt. My taxes pay for that truck. You're messing with the American food chain. Sal appeared next to him. Yeah, think of the tater tots. Brenda's head swiveled toward my house, her eyes narrowing. The combined assault of my logic and the contractor's blue-collar heckling had breached her outer defenses. This is precisely the kind of riffraff I warned the board about when this property was sold, she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Leo, the driver, tried again. Look, I just need to get to the park. The kids are waiting. It's Nugget Day. You don't mess with Nugget Day. Brenda scoffed, a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. The aesthetic integrity of this neighborhood supersedes your Nugget Day. She then did what all cornered authoritarians do. She escalated. She pulled out a cell phone that looked as old and beige as her car. I am calling the police, she announced to the cul-de-sac at large. I'm reporting an illegal commercial operation, unauthorized loitering, and a hostile resident. Hostile? I hadn't even deployed my full arsenal of sarcasm yet. That was just the warning shot across the bow. Minute 131. The ill-advised phone calls. I pulled out my own phone. My first instinct was to record, to gather evidence for the inevitable kangaroo court of the HOA. But then a better, more beautifully catastrophic idea bloomed in my mind. Brenda was calling the local cops. I knew Officer Henderson. He had the weary, soul-deep exhaustion of a man who had responded to Brenda's calls about aggressively blooming azaleas and a squirrel that looked at me funny. He would come, he would sigh, and nothing would happen. I needed a different tool from the toolbox. I scrolled through my contacts, past Gus, the contractor, past dentist, Payne, and landed on a name that always promised chaos. Colonel Kev Never Tell Him the Full Story Galloway. I hit dial. He picked up on the second ring, his voice a frantic bark over the sound of wind and distant shouting. Jack, talk to me. I'm in the middle of a command post exercise and some two-star general is trying to use my head as a stress ball. You okay? Your neighborhood hasn't been annexed by Canada, has it? Worse, Kev, much worse, I said, injecting my voice with as much gravitas as I could muster while looking at a woman in a taupe pantsuit. I've got a developing situation here. A local warlord has established a blockade. A what? Jack, use your words. I don't have time for your games. She's interdicting a critical supply line, I continued, pacing my lawn. Gus and Manny were giving me encouraging thumbs-ups. A tyrant in sensible shoes is preventing the delivery of vital nutritional assets to non-combatants. Civilian obstruction, Jack, what the hell are you talking about? Is she armed? The stress in Kev's voice was suddenly very, very real. He was biting the hook. Now, this was the point where a responsible friend would have clarified. A responsible friend would have said, No, Kev, it's just my crazy HOA president and a food truck. But 20 years of friendship with Kev had taught me that he had two settings, bored and overwhelming force. I decided to see what would happen if I nudged the switch. Only with a binder and a staggering sense of self-importance, I said, a grin spreading across my face. Look, the main thing is, she's blocking a school lunch truck. We're talking tater tots, Kev. The kids are going to riot. It's a matter of national food security. I heard him curse. Blockade, civilian obstruction, critical supplies, national food security. He was repeating the key words, the ones that light up on a military officer's big board of problems. Where are you? Harmony Creek, right? I remember from your housewarming party. The one with the terrible wine. It was a gift from Brenda, actually, I shot back. Figures. Hang on. The phone went quiet for a moment, but I could hear his muffled voice shouting in the background. It sounded urgent. Where's the 142nd Combat Sustainment Battalion right now? I thought they were on a road march exercise. How far are they from Harmony Creek? Scramble them, reroute them. Tell Lieutenant Evans this is no longer a drill. Operation Golden Nugget is a go. My blood ran cold. The grin evaporated from my face. Kev? I said, my voice a little weak. Kev, what is Operation Golden Nugget? It sounds crunchy. Gotta go, Jack. Help is on the way, he yelled. Don't engage the hostile. I'm sending you backup. Galloway out. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. There are moments in life that future historians will point to as the precise point where everything went sideways. For me, it was the phrase Operation Golden Nugget. My knees felt a little weak. What had I done? Just then, a local police cruiser, number 214, rolled silently up to the scene. The driver's side door opened, and Officer Henderson unfolded himself from the car. He had that special kind of posture that only comes from dealing with the same nonsense day after day. His partner, Officer Ramirez, stayed in the car, probably updating her resume. Minute 3:01. The rumble and the arrival. Henderson didn't even look at me. His eyes were locked on Brenda. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of all human suffering. Brenda, he said, his voice flat. Let me guess. The truck's paint scheme is too vibrant, and its very presence is causing the petunias to wilt. Brenda, vindicated by the arrival of what she considered her personal police force, puffed up her chest. Officer, thank you for coming. This is a flagrant violation of Bylaw 74C. I demand you cite this vehicle and its driver for illegal commercial operations. Henderson pinched the bridge of his nose, right below his sunglasses. It's a summer lunch program, Brenda. It's a town-sanctioned vehicle. We've been over this. He turned to me. She do this a lot? She's the final boss of the suburbs, I said grimly. I think I just made a terrible mistake. And then I heard it. It started as a vibration, a low hum I felt in the soles of my sneakers. My coffee cup on the porch railing rattled. Gus and his crew stopped their pretense of work, their heads cocked. Hey, boss, Gus said, his voice strangely quiet. You order a tank? The hum grew into a rumble, then a deep, guttural thrum that swallowed the sound of birdsong and distant leaf blowers. It was the sound of heavy-duty diesel engines, a lot of them, working in unison. Brenda stopped her tirade, a look of annoyance on her face. What is that racket? Is someone violating the noise ordinance 22F? That's a $50 fine. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then it turned the corner. It wasn't a tank. It was a high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle, a Humvee, painted in military green, with a whip antenna that swayed as it took the turn into our sleepy cul-de-sac. It was followed immediately by another. Then, looming behind them like a mechanical behemoth, came a light-medium tactical vehicle, an LMTV, the kind of six-wheeled beast I used to move entire companies' worth of gear. And behind that, a third Humvee brought up the rear. They weren't speeding, but they moved with a heavy, implacable purpose that made Brenda's beige sedan look like a child's toy. They rolled forward, their massive tires whispering on the clean suburban asphalt, and arranged themselves in a perfect tactical formation around the cul-de-sac. The lead Humvee pulled to a halt directly in front of my lawn. Its engine idled with a menacing growl that vibrated in my chest. For a moment, Everything was silent except for that low, powerful hum. The passenger door opened. A young man in crisp army fatigues and polished combat boots stepped out. He was all sharp angles and ramrod straight posture. He put on his patrol cap, adjusted his web gear, and scanned the scene with the bewildered eyes of a man who had been expecting a war zone. His gaze swept over a fuming HOA president, an amused logistics sergeant in cargo shorts, 2 utterly stupefied local police officers, 3 stunned contractors covered in dust, and 1 very confused lunch truck driver. His eyes finally landed on me, the only person present who looked remotely like I might know what to do with a convoy. The young officer took a deep breath, stood even straighter, and shattered the suburban silence. "Are you Sergeant Major Miller?" he called out, his voice loud and official. "Colonel Galloway sent us. I'm Lieutenant Evans. I was told you had a hostile blockade situation that required immediate military intervention." A bird chirped somewhere. Gus dropped his hammer. Officer Henderson slowly, deliberately, took off his sunglasses as if to confirm that what he was seeing was real. And just like that, 4 minutes after Brenda Larchwood decided to die on the hill of Bylaw 74C, I, Jack Miller, retired suburbanite, became the reluctant commander of the Harmony Creek Estates Liberation Army. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the thrum of 4 military-grade diesel engines and the frantic beating of my own heart. Brenda's mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. She looked like a goldfish that had just been slapped with a dictionary. The binder, her source of power, her Excalibur, hung limply at her side, utterly useless against a battalion's worth of actual authority. Officer Henderson stared at the LMTV, then at me, then back at the LMTV. "Miller," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "What in the sweet name of all that is holy did you do?" Ramirez had finally gotten out of the patrol car. She was just slowly shaking her head, a small, sad smile on her face. It was the smile of someone who has seen it all and has now decided to just enjoy the ride into madness. There are forks in the road of life. One path was to explain everything, to tell the nice lieutenant that there had been a terrible, hilarious misunderstanding, to apologize for wasting military time and taxpayer dollars, to retreat back to my porch and let the professionals handle Brenda. The other path was to lean in. I was a master sergeant. For 20 years, my job was to take vague, sometimes idiotic orders from officers and turn them into successful on-the-ground action. My body, my very soul, was hardwired to see a lieutenant looking for orders and a chaotic situation, and to impose order upon it. I snapped into a posture I hadn't used in 6 months. My back straightened, my shoulders squared. I strode purposefully across my lawn, my flip-flops making a determined slapping sound on the grass. "At ease, Lieutenant," I said, my voice carrying the easy authority of a senior NCO. "Let's assess the operational area." Lieutenant Evans, who couldn't have been more than 24, blinked. He was a coiled spring of by-the-book military energy, and he was desperately looking for a mission briefing that made sense. "Sir, Master Sergeant Miller?" "Just Jack is fine, Lieutenant," I said, clapping him on the shoulder and steering him slightly away from the others for a private conference. "Okay, here's the deal. Colonel Galloway, in his infinite enthusiasm, may have slightly overestimated the current threat level." The lieutenant's face was a mask of confusion. "Sir, my orders were, and I quote, to proceed immediately to the rally point, neutralize any and all obstruction with extreme prejudice, and ensure the safe passage of critical civilian supplies." He mentioned something about tater tots? "The intelligence is accurate, if a little dramatic," I conceded. "The mission objective remains unchanged. That truck, I pointed to the mobile Munchies vehicle, where Leo the driver was now staring at me with the kind of awe usually reserved for deities, needs to deliver its payload to the target zone. I gestured to the park entrance, a mere 100 feet away. The primary obstacle is that hostile asset. I nodded my head grimly towards Brenda, who was now being cautiously approached by Henderson and Ramirez. "The woman in the beige?" the lieutenant asked, his voice full of doubt. "Don't let the camouflage fool you, son. She's armed with a comprehensive knowledge of restrictive covenants and a complete lack of shame. She's a formidable opponent in her chosen battle space." The lieutenant stared at me, then at Brenda, then at the massive cargo truck behind him. A flicker of understanding, or maybe it was just despair, crossed his face. "So, my mission is to help a lunch truck drive around that lady's sedan?" "Not help, Lieutenant," I corrected him gently. "We will facilitate a tactical repositioning. We are providing overwatch for a high-value asset during a contested transit. It's a textbook lightning assault, overwhelming force, precision execution, minimal engagement time. Sun Tzu would be proud." I saw a change in his eyes. I was speaking his language. I had given him a framework, however absurd, to place this insanity into. He stood up a little straighter. "Understood, Master Sergeant." "Good man. Now let's hold a quick command team meeting." I strode back to the center of the cul-de-sac and beckoned the others. "All right, gentlemen, listen up." My new ad hoc command team consisted of a bewildered National Guard lieutenant, 2 local cops who looked like they'd won the lottery, and Gus the contractor, who was grinning so wide I thought his face might crack. "Here's the plan," I began, falling into the familiar rhythm of a mission brief. "Lieutenant Evans, I need your men to establish a non-threatening cordon. We're not looking to intimidate. We're creating a safe passage corridor. Think less military checkpoint, more VIP red carpet, but with more camo and less carpet." Lieutenant Evans nodded, already relaying the orders into his radio. "Griffin units, establish a soft cordon. Phase line Alpha is the oak tree. Phase line Bravo is the mailbox for number 118. On my mark." I turned to Gus. "Gus, you and your boys are my engineering corps. You've got the best eyes on the terrain. I need you to guide the Mobile Munchies truck through the gap. Use those hand signals you use when Manny is trying to back the flatbed up without hitting my prize-winning roses." "You got it, boss," Gus beamed. "Sal knows how to drive anything with wheels. We could probably just lift her car with the forklift we brought for your kitchen granite, but that feels like overkill." He paused, stroking his chin. "Maybe. Let's keep that as a contingency plan," I said seriously. "Officers Henderson and Ramirez," I turned to the cops. "You're our diplomatic corps. You handle the hostile. Brenda is all yours. Now that you have, shall we say, a significant number of official witnesses, I imagine any citation you write for obstruction will have a bit more teeth." Henderson's weary expression was replaced by a slow, predatory grin. It was terrifying. "Ramirez," he said without looking at his partner, "get the big book of tickets, the one with the carbon copies." Brenda finally found her voice. It was a high-pitched shriek of pure outrage. "This is a gross misuse of taxpayer money. This is intimidation. I am going to report you all to my congressman. I pay your salaries." I looked at the lieutenant. "See? The hostile is attempting psychological warfare. We must not waver." The plan went into motion with a surreal efficiency. A dozen soldiers, all looking profoundly confused but impeccably professional, dismounted from the trucks. They moved with practiced speed, forming a loose, almost ceremonial line from the lunch truck, around the spot where Brenda's car had been, and toward the park entrance. It was the most intimidating velvet rope in history. Gus, in his element, stood in the middle of the street, directing Leo the lunch truck driver like a ground crew chief guiding a 747. Easy, easy. Give me 5 feet. Now crank it. Crank the wheel. You got it. You're clear. Meanwhile, Henderson and Ramirez descended upon Brenda. "Brenda Larchwood," Henderson said, his voice now booming with newfound authority. "You are being cited for obstruction of a public thoroughfare, impeding a municipal program, and, he glanced at the Humvees, contributing to a situation requiring an interagency response." Ramirez was writing furiously on her clipboard. "I've got her for a noise violation, too. That shriek was definitely above the decibel limit." Defeated, deflated, and utterly outmaneuvered, Brenda stared at the wall of military green, the grinning cops, and the gleeful contractors. Her entire world, a carefully constructed kingdom of petty rules and regulations, had been bulldozed by a convoy of actual undeniable power. She snatched the ticket from Henderson's hand, got into her beige sedan without another word, and sped away. The path was clear. I clapped Lieutenant Evans on the shoulder. "Phase 1 complete, Lieutenant. Superb execution. Now for the escort." A wide smile finally broke through his professional demeanor. He keyed his radio. "All call signs, this is Griffin 1. The objective is mobile. I say again, the objective is mobile. We are commencing escort to the landing zone. I want a forward and rear guard. Operation Golden Nugget is in its final phase. Over." The absurdity of it was intoxicating. I couldn't resist. I jogged over to the lead Humvee and hopped up onto the running board, gripping the door frame. "Leo!" I yelled to the lunch truck driver. "Follow us. Stay tight in the formation." Leo, his eyes wide as dinner plates, gave me a shaky thumbs up. "Gus!" I shouted. "You've got eyes on. Let me know if you see any more hostiles." Gus saluted me with a claw hammer. "All clear, Commander." And so it began. The Great Harmony Creek Estates Liberation Parade. The lead Humvee rolled forward at a stately 3 miles per hour, with me, Jack Miller, clinging to the side like a general in a victory parade. Behind us, the cheerful Mobile Munchies truck, its cartoon hot dog seeming to grin, followed dutifully. Bringing up the rear was the second Humvee and the colossal LMTV, its engine a deep bass note in our bizarre symphony. We were the most heavily armed, most secure delivery of school lunches in the history of mankind. We rolled the 100 feet to the park entrance. About 20 kids, who had been waiting on the swings and grass, stopped and stared. Their mouths fell open. They weren't seeing a suburban squabble that had gotten out of hand. They were seeing their lunch, their glorious nugget day, arriving with a full military escort. One kid, a little boy with a red shirt, pointed and yelled, "Whoa, the Army brought our food!" And then they started cheering. A wild, joyous, high-pitched roar of approval. For a moment, standing there on the side of that Humvee, with the suburban sun on my face and the smell of diesel and imminent corn dogs in the air, I felt more alive than I had in years. This was it. This was the peace and quiet I'd been looking for. It just came with a few more tactical vehicles than I'd anticipated. The kids descended upon the Mobile Munchies truck like a conquering horde, their cheers for the Army quickly replaced by urgent negotiations over extra ketchup packets. Leo was handing out lunch trays with the dazed, beatific smile of a man who had witnessed a miracle. Mission accomplished. Back in the cul-de-sac, the National Guard unit was preparing to pull out. The soldiers were trying very hard to look serious, but I could see them sneaking glances at each other, stifling grins. They knew they'd have a story to tell for the rest of their careers. Lieutenant Evans was leaning against the hood of his Humvee, trying to fill out his after-action report on a tablet. He kept typing, deleting, and sighing. "Master Sergeant, Jack," he began. looking up at me with pleading eyes. "How do I write this? Seriously." At 1400 hours, we deployed a heavy tactical convoy to ensure the timely distribution of tater tots. The colonel is going to have my hide for the fuel expenditure alone. I leaned against the warm metal beside him. "Nonsense, Lieutenant. You're thinking like a platoon leader. You need to think like a staff officer. Bureaucratic poetry. It's an art form." He looked skeptical. "You write it like this," I instructed. Upon arrival at the designated flashpoint, our unit executed a decisive show of force that successfully de-escalated a volatile civil disturbance. See? No mention of lunch. A flicker of interest in his eyes. "Go on." Our presence effectively neutralized a non-compliant local belligerent who was actively obstructing a critical community support mission. That covers Brenda. "I like non-compliant local belligerent," he muttered, typing furiously. The operation concluded with the successful facilitation of said mission and a significant positive outcome in civilian-military relations, all achieved with 0 casualties and no expenditure of ordnance. "You're not a guy who helped a food truck, Lieutenant. You're a hero who prevented a riot and won the hearts and minds of the next generation. You deserve a medal." He stopped typing and looked at me, a slow, wide grin spreading across his face. "Yes, sir. A volatile civil disturbance. I like that very much." He stood straight and offered a crisp salute. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." "Any time, Lieutenant. Now get your men out of here before Brenda comes back with a lawyer." As the convoy rumbled away, leaving my street feeling unnervingly quiet, my phone rang. The caller ID read, "Kev, do not answer." I answered, "Jack!" The voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What in the blue blazes did you do?" "Colonel Galloway, a pleasure to hear your voice," I said calmly. "Don't you colonel me, you maniac. My phone is melting. The Brigadier General is asking me why one of my combat sustainment battalions just staged a full-scale combined arms operation in a gated community in the middle of a Tuesday. My career is flashing before my eyes." "Relax, Kev. It was a flawless operation. The tots were delivered. Civilian-military relations in Harmony Creek have never been stronger. I'm a local hero." "A local hero? I'm looking at a TikTok video of you riding a Humvee like it's a float in the Rose Parade. It's set to Ride of the Valkyries. It has 1 million views. It's tagged #Suburban Liberation and #Operation Golden Nugget." I winced. "Okay, the optics could have been better." "Could have been better?" "Jack, I'm going to be doing paperwork until I'm 90. There will be inquiries. There will be PowerPoint presentations. So many PowerPoint presentations." His voice trailed off in a groan of pure existential dread. "Don't ever call me for anything less than an actual alien invasion again. And I mean actual aliens, Jack, with spaceships and ray guns, not just Brenda Larchwood." "Understood," I said. "But for the record, it was a spectacular success." I could hear him sigh, a sound that traveled through the phone and across the state. "Just send me a t-shirt, you jerk." He hung up. I was still smiling when Gus and his crew came over, packing up their tools for the day. Gus clapped me hard on the back, nearly knocking me over. "Boss," he said, his face glowing with a mixture of sweat, dust, and pure joy. "That was the single greatest thing I have ever seen on a job site, bar none. Better than the time Sal tried to use a leaf blower to clean out the van." Manny nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, man. My wife is never going to believe this. I got it all on video, though. You're a legend. You're like the king of the suburbs." "The kitchen granite," Gus said, pointing a thumb back at my house. "It's on the house, installation and everything. We're calling it an entertainment fee. It's the least we can do for our commander." Just as they were leaving, Officer Henderson's cruiser swung by one last time. He leaned out the passenger window, looking 10 years younger. "Miller," he said, a grin playing on his lips. "The chief called. He wants to know who authorized a joint ops mission in his jurisdiction. I told him it was classified and above my pay grade." He paused. "Off the record? Brenda hasn't called once in the last hour. It's a miracle. The dispatchers are thinking of sending you a fruit basket. You ever need a parking ticket to disappear? You know who to call?" He gave me a little salute, and the cruiser pulled away. I walked back to my porch, the scene of the crime, and saw a piece of paper taped to my front door. It was a crisp, official-looking notice from the Harmony Creek Estates Homeowners Association, signed by B. Larchwood. It was a fine. 2, actually. Violation 1. Unauthorized staging of a military exercise on community property. Fine. $500. Violation 2. Unapproved vehicular modifications. Leading a convoy without prior written consent from the Architectural Review Committee. Fine. $200. I looked at the paper, then at my quiet street. I thought about the cheering kids, the grinning soldiers, the defeated look on Brenda's face. I crumpled the notice into a tight ball and tossed it perfectly into my recycling bin, which was, of course, placed at the curb no earlier than 6 p.m. the evening before pickup per bylaw 38G. I figured if Brenda really wanted to collect the $700, she could send her demand through the Pentagon. I was pretty sure my old buddy Kev would file it under hostile propaganda and authorize another training exercise to investigate. That evening, I sat on my porch again, this time with a cold beer. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The neighborhood was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the sterile, anxious silence of before. It was a comfortable, settled peace. A neighbor from across the street, a guy I'd only ever nodded to, walked by with his dog. He stopped, looked at me, and gave me a slow, respectful nod. Another neighbor, watering her roses, gave me a clear thumbs up. My house was still a construction zone. My savings account was bruised, and I was pretty sure I was now on some kind of federal watch list for comical misuse of military assets. But for the first time since I'd moved in, Harmony Creek Estates felt like home. The next day at noon, I heard a familiar sound. The mobile Munchies truck rolled down the street. As it passed my house, the driver, Leo, laid on the horn twice in a short, cheerful salute. I raised my coffee cup to him in return. Across the street, I saw Brenda Larchwood's beige curtains twitch. But her front door remained closed. Her car stayed firmly in her driveway. I came to the suburbs looking for a quiet life, a place to decompress. I wanted to trade my helmet for a grilling apron, my orders for a honeydew list. I thought the biggest conflict I'd face was a crabgrass infestation. But it turns out, you can take the sergeant out of the Army, but you can't take the Army's ridiculously over-the-top problem-solving tendencies out of the sergeant, or his friends. The cul-de-sac is peaceful now. It's the kind of peace that comes from knowing not to mess with the guy in House 112. Not because he's mean, or loud, or aggressive, but because his idea of calling a friend for help involves a column of armored vehicles and an official operation name. And if Brenda ever gets a crazy idea about blocking that lunch truck again, well, I hear the Air National Guard has a pretty impressive drone program. Operation Tater Tot Takeout has a nice ring to it.